welcome to episode 165 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 20th of May. So welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today we have some knitting, some cross stitch, a little bit of sewing, a few questions from the Ask Me Anything thread, either from the Ravelry group or from emails, and also a little bit of information on my shop update, which is this Friday at 7 PM GMT. So you can find me on Instagram, Ravelry and Facebook as Craft House Magic, and I have my own website, crafthousemagik.co.uk, where you can find my hand-dyed yarn, handmade project bags, stitch markers, HiyaHiya knitting needles and crochet hooks, as well as Clover crochet hooks, and also bag making supplies. We have a couple of Makalongs going on in the Ravelry group and on Instagram, and there are details of those in the description bar below with the show notes. So let's get on with the knitting, shall we? And first thing I've got to show you is a finished object, but Adam's mum Liz has knitted this for me out of the yarn from my stash, and this is called the Six Wives Shawl, and it is a lovely simple pattern, good for beginners. And this enables you to use sort of 100 gram skein for the main part, and then a bunch of minis. And I've got a set of 5 minis here that's been used to knit this shawl. And this was a Curated Yarn Co mini set that was called Opulence. So I've used most of those to make up this long edge of the shawl here. And then I've picked out a Lay Family Yarns skein that I had in my stash that didn't have a label on it, because I thought that that went with those colours really well. And it's a brilliant pattern, this is, just because there's lots of stockinette stitch for this bit, and then you've got garter stitch for these stripy bits at the bottom, which is rather lovely. I have sewn in the ends, but I haven't blocked it yet, but I thought actually it might be quite interesting to show you what it looks like before blocking, and then I'll block it for next week so you can see what it looks like when it's actually been blocked, and it comes out much drapier. So I'll show you close up of what the yarn looks like knitted up. So that's the Lay Family Yarns, and this is the Curated Yarn Co minis for the bottom bit. So it's a great way of using mini sets from your stash and incorporating them with either you could do like an undyed yarn there, if you didn't want to have to match up the colours too much. And also the pattern suggests that you can use some mohair or fluffy yarn held together with this to sort of give it an extra bit of fluffiness, but these are just knitted out of yarns from my stash, and so I thought that they'd work nicely just together on their own. So there's no yarns held double in this version, but you can do, the pattern does give you the option to do that. It does actually come out really long. Well, that is if you use a whole skein for this first bit here. So it's about a metre so far, so that's like 2 meters for the length of it to wrap around you nicely, and I'd probably wear it mostly like this. And then you've got that beautiful stripy section at the front here, which I think's really lovely. I think quite often you look at a shawl pattern and you look at it sort of laid out, but actually it depends on how you're going to wear it, and I think that that looks really nice on, because you can see the stripes right at the front there. You could always wear it like a traditional shawl as well, around the shoulders. But it's nice to be able to wear it as a scarf as well and use it for different sort of outfits and occasions. So there we go. You could of course put like a shawl pin just there to keep it on. Right, so that's the first thing I've got to show you in knitting, but I have been working quite a lot on my Cosy Memories blanket this week. So I've now got to find the edge that I've been knitting on. I should have been more organised and got it all ready to show you. Ah, this is it. So I've done 12 squares this week, and these ones are the ones that I've been working on across here. So let's see if I can remember which one's which. So this one's a Bad Wolf Girl yarn, and this is the Newt Scamander colourway. This one here is Down Sheepy Lane, and I think it was Paper Roses for that one. Really pretty. And this one's Malabrigo. This one here is Wool Barn yarn, and I can't remember what it was called, that particular one, but it's a beautiful sort of creamy background with very delicate speckles of sort of pinks and greens. I had a few little minis that I bought in a tiny little set from Henny Penny Makes. She does little packs of 12, a little 5-gram minis wrapped around little cards, which I think was brilliant. And I think the next, this, because I had a blue set, you see, all the way across there is all Henny Penny Makes set that I picked out, and there was 12 in a pack, so I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 so far, so I've got another 5 of those to go. And this one at the end is just another little mini, I'm not sure what it is, in my stash. So that's a whole row done this week. I have literally got one more row to finish it so that it's a balanced sort of pattern on this blanket. So each of these, you can see that this bit is going all in this direction. I'm doing 7 rows in one direction, changing the direction up so it's like a chevron, doing 7 rows in that direction, and then back to 7 rows in the other direction. So it goes sort of up, down, but it's difficult to show you holding it up, but it is pretty huge. And what I've tried to do is alternate sort of dark and light colours so that it's sort of balanced, even though it's sort of random colours, to use up all the scraps and all the memories of yarn swaps and minis that I've picked up from yarn shows and things. So it's 21 squares this way and it is 12 squares this way. So I was planning on having it on the lap. Me and Adam sat when we're watching the TV, and that's nice to go over the two of us. After I've done one more row, I'm going to be doing an I-cord bind off all the way around the outside, but I haven't quite decided on what colour I'm going to do it in yet. Something that sort of blends in well with the other colours on here, I think. But I'm really excited to finish this. I want to get it finished this year, so I'm going to try and get another 12 squares done by next week. We shall see if I can manage that, because it takes me over an hour to do one square. So if you're interested in doing a Cosy Memories blanket like I have, I've got 3 tutorials on my my knitting tutorials playlist that are all to do with knitting the blanket. There's one tutorial on how to do one square, there's a second tutorial on how to join the squares, and then there's a third tutorial of how to do sort of this kind of layout with the chevrons or like a radiating design, and I will leave links to those in the description bar down below, and I'll try and tag it on the screen as well up there if I remember. So I'm so close to having a massive finished blanket. And I will have to count actually how many squares are here in total and work out how many hours it's taken me. I think I go through spates of being obsessed with knitting on the blanket, and then I've just left it for a while. But because I've only got 12 squares to go, I'm sure that I can finish that very soon. So that's all the knitting I've got to show you this week, but I do have a little bit of cross stitch to show you. So I'm working on this bookmark pattern with a lovely ice cream on, and it basically gives you a kit with all the things that you need to complete the bookmark. You have fabric, you have threads, you have backing material, you have the tassel to go with it as well, so everything you need is in the kit. And this is how far I've got with it so far. You can sort of see sort of the ice cream and the flake, but I need to go back over this and do some back stitch so that it really sort of defines the shape. But I have actually done quite a bit. I think I've sort of got halfway with at least the main cross stitch part, but obviously I need to do that back stitch as well. But I'm excited to finish it. I just haven't had as much time in the mornings to do sort of 20 minutes every day that I was doing before, so I'm only sort of doing 5 or 10 minutes every day. At least I'm keeping on top of it though, that's good. So that is my cross stitch I've got to show you. I don't actually have proper sewing to show you, but I have got a project that I've been working on this weekend, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about it. So the thing that I've been working on this weekend is trying to copy this scruffy t-shirt that I have in my wardrobe. Now I won't chuck it away until I've managed to sort of replicate it, because I love the shape of this top. It is literally going really thin under the arms. But I will not throw it away until I've managed to sort of replicate it a bit. So what I've decided to do is that I've got a few t-shirt patterns in my sort of sewing pattern stash. So I thought what I'd do is use the Agnes t-shirt by Tilly and the Buttons pattern for this top bit here. So it's got a standard sleeves at the side and a round neck. So I thought that that would be sort of ideal. But what I've actually done is I've drafted a facing to replicate this sort of strip at the top, but I'm not going to do a contrast neckline like it does here. What I've done is just drafted out the facing, and what I'm going to do on the back once I've sort of interfaced it and stitched it on is that I'm going to top stitch all the way around the neckline so that it forms this wider sort of neckband. And there is a false button band on there as well, which I'm going to replicate just by stitching a little bit of extra fabric and adding some buttons on there. So the next thing that I'm done, so I've made the pattern pieces and cut them out, but I haven't started stitching them yet. But there is a separate panel across the underbust here and some gathering. So what I've done actually is, because I wanted this line to be slightly lower so that it just came over my bust slightly, so I've actually marked on the pattern piece for the Agnes t-shirt and then traced it out for the size that I want it, so that I've got a pattern piece for the front and the sleeves, and then I've drafted my own piece for this bottom bit here. So what I basically did, just to simplify things, is that I measured the width of it at the bottom, and then I just drafted a rectangle piece, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather it just under the bust there so that it then goes wider at the bottom and is a nice swishy summery top. So there we go, that's what I'm doing to copy it. And I've got a little bit of the fabric to show you what I'm going to be using, and it is this fabric that I picked up from Seasalt. This must have been last year, I think, when I bought this. It's a jersey fabric and it's a cotton jersey, but it hasn't got any elastine in it, and I think that that's got a decent amount of drape to be okay with the gathering around the bust. We shall see how it turns out. But I thought, rather than drafting the whole thing out or unpicking the t-shirt, because it's an old t-shirt, it's stretched out a bit, just sort of use it as a guideline and use the Agnes t-shirt by Tilly and the Buttons as the sort of main part for up here, because I know that that top fits me really nicely. I'll let you know how I get on with that next week. So I've got a few questions from the Ask Me Anything thread now. So you can pop over to the Ravelry group and ask your question there. I don't always put an answer to the actual comments there, because I'm obviously giving the answer on the podcast and it'll be repeating myself if I replied on the thread. But I do check it quite often. If you don't have access to Ravelry, you can use my email address, crafthousemagik@gmail.com. You can find that in the description bar down below, but also on my website as well. So the first question is from Beth, and she was asking, what does chuffed mean? Because I use the term quite a lot. So chuffed means just quite pleased, quite happy, in a sort of friendly, relaxed way. It's quite a slang term. I don't know if the kids use that sort of terminology these days. It's probably a bit 90s and probably sort of northern England, I think, that uses the term chuffed. I picked it up when I was at university, I think. The next question is from Bonnie, and she was saying that I've got lots of projects on the go and I also managed to do my own business. Do I have staff, and does Adam help? How do I manage to get it all done? I don't really know. I tend to do most things myself. Adam sometimes will give me a hand with getting the labels on postage done, but I always do the packaging myself and I make everything myself as well. But he does give me a hand sometimes with jobs like going down to the post office as well. He always is doing those things for me, which is very helpful. But everything else I do myself. I don't really know what I do. I constantly do crafts, so I've always got it on my mind. I think if you're thinking about what I'm going to be doing next, I think that helps you sort of dive into the next project and get more done, I suppose. And planning ahead is always a good idea if you want to get more done. But actually getting more done isn't always the best thing. It's enjoying what you're doing rather than just rushing on to the next project. And the next question is from Erin, and she was wondering about using different yarn bases of the same weight in a project, like as if you're going to do like a fade or like a garment, but not if you're holding things double, but if you're going to flow from one yarn and then sort of fade into another yarn in the same project. Is there going to be differences stitch definition, in drape, and would you be able to tell there's different bases, and would it wear the same? Now, I think that you have to be quite thoughtful when you're using different bases in the same garment. I think if it's a shawl, for instance, I wouldn't worry about wear so much, because obviously it's not going to be rubbed. Like, say if you're wearing a top perhaps under the arm, that would be an area that rubs quite a lot, so you'd want to make sure that you used a quite durable yarn in areas that will get more wear, if that makes sense. But I don't see why you can't mix yarn bases, as long as it isn't a garment that is very sort of cabled, for instance. I think if it was a cabled pattern or a lacy pattern, you'd need to be more careful about which yarns that you combined. If it's just a plain stockinette or garter stitch, I think you'd probably be okay. But it's just sort of being careful about your choices. I have got a t-shirt which I've used several yarns, so I will go and grab now. So this is the V-back tee by Jamie Hoffman, and I have used 3 different yarns here. The top one is like a BFL nylon, and then I think, so this one is a merino nylon on stellina, and then I've used a normal merino nylon mix at the bottom. So when I was sort of thinking, right, the first thought I had, I wanted sort of the lighter colour closer to my face so that the darker colour would sort of slim the body down. But the top is a BFL, so it will drape slightly differently to the merinos and the stellina and merino mix. So I made sure that those were sort of at the bottom. So I think the BFL being at the top, if there was a difference in drape, it doesn't matter, because that isn't part of the bit that's a drapey bit, if that makes sense. So that one, I think, was a nice combination of yarns, so you can absolutely get away with it. And because this is just stockinette stitch, I don't think you can really tell. You might be able to see a little bit of sparkle in the middle there, but to me, I didn't mind having a little bit of a section with a sparkly bit when the rest wasn't. So it's really up to you. The only thing is that if I was knitting a garment, I'd be careful about using yarns that aren't really suitable for making garments with. I tend to avoid single yarns that are not plied, because they will wear more anyway. So I don't really like using those for garments or socks and things. Some people do, but they will not last as long as a plied yarn. So you just have to sort of work out what pattern you're going to be using and whether that will work well with the combination of yarns that you've chosen. So I think you can absolutely mix yarn bases together. It just depends on your preferences and what pattern you're going for. So I think I would avoid, if I was going for a very cable-y pattern, I would avoid having a yarn that sort of, one that works really well with the cables and then one that perhaps didn't. I think I would try to avoid the combination of a non-superwash yarn with a superwash yarn, because a superwash and a non-superwash act completely differently. So I would be very aware of combining those two together. I tend to avoid that, I think. But I think if you you could always do a swatch, see what it looks like, and with a lot of these shawls and things, you can absolutely get away with mixing sort of 80-20 BFL with merino and nylon, sort of 75-25 mixture. It absolutely won't make too much difference. Also, you have to be aware that even though it's a fingering weight yarn, it might actually vary quite a lot in the thickness. So if it's something that you need to have to fit to a particular size, then that's another thing to worry about as well. So the last question I've got in the Ask Me Anything thread is from Tammy, and she was talking about negative ease in socks. she said that she's heard that most people knit socks that are too big, and what are my thoughts on fit? Now, I absolutely will never knit a pair of socks that are the same size as my leg. I will always use negative ease because they will fall down, they will not fit very well, and when you have, say, a merino and nylon yarn, a superwash yarn, they will stretch as you wear them, so you do not want to knit them the same size as your foot. I do have a video on how to get knit socks that fit, and I will pop the link in the description bar down below and also in the top of the screen there, so you can click on it. But that just gives you an idea of how I calculate what stitch count I use and for who it's going to fit. So always consider about 1.5 to 2 inches of negative ease on a sock, I would say. I do go through this in a little bit more detail in the tutorial, which I'll link. But you're basically wanting to have it just a little bit tighter than your leg. So when I say negative ease, I think some people get confused by, oh, I don't understand what negative ease is. It's really, really simple. So if you think about, say, how thick your leg is or your body, if you take that measurement and you knit a piece of clothing or sock the width of that measurement, you will end up with 0 ease. And if you knit something that's, say, 2 to 4 inches narrower, that is negative ease because you've taken away fabric. And if you add positive ease, like if you wanted a t-shirt that was very drapey, you might want to add 2 to 4 inches of positive ease. That's adding material, so that is positive. So that's how I sort of remember which way round it is. Negative ease is tighter, positive ease is bigger. So you're taking away fabric for negative ease and you're adding fabric for positive ease. So with socks, definitely you need negative ease. I've never knitted a pair of socks that was exactly the size of my leg because they will fall down. So I hope you find that's useful, Tammy, and I'll link a few of my sock tutorials in the description bar down below as well if you need any help with sort of sock knitting. I've got a few free patterns that are available on my website if you're new to sock knitting, and there's that video on how to get socks that fit. So I've just got my shop update to share with you now. So it's the June yarn clubs is going to be available from Friday, that's the 21st of May at 7 PM GMT. And it will be available on the website, so you'll be able to order it, pre-order it on the website until the 6th of June. And if you order the yarn clubs for June, I will be shipping those on the 18th of June. Also, I just wanted to say that I am restocking some of the HiyaHiya needles this Friday at 7 PM. I have noticed that at the warehouse they're still out of stock of quite a few needles, especially the bamboo ones, so I am keeping an eye on the website there for the warehouse, just to make sure that I'm going to get on top of my stock, because there are a few bamboo needles that I have had out of stock for a little while. So I will keep an eye on the website and keep my shop updated as quickly as possible. And I will, of course, tell you on the podcast when I've got another shipment in or things that are restocked. Most of the steel and the sharp needles are back in stock and fully stocked by Friday. I think the only thing that I'm out of stock of is the 2.5mm steel flyers, but the rest of them are fully stocked as well, so that's okay. Mainly the bamboo ones that are low in stock. I believe that there was actually a low harvest in bamboo last year. That's why there's been less needles as well, so that was quite interesting to find out. Anyway, I shall stop waffling now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you in the next episode. Bye!